Okay, now that you have all of the blocks of color attached, we put the right sides of our doll together, and I want you to just kind of measure and make sure that the seams line up. Okay, if they don't quite line up, then just kind of, depending on how much of a difference you have, you can actually re-sew some seams. You don't even have to take anything out. You can just make the seam a little bit larger. Just make another set of stitches a little bit farther up into the fabric, however much you need. You also might need to tear out some stitches. It's just really depends on the degree to which there are differences. Okay, and then when you have everything lined up, then you want to start pinning, and especially where there are seams, you can even kind of stretch the fabric a little bit. Okay, you don't have to worry about the drawings lining up. Okay, because that's all going to be hidden, and that was just kind of a guideline for you to line things up. And okay, now all of this stitching can actually be completed by hand stitching. Okay, it's just that if you do have a sewing machine and you have a little bit of experience, it can make sewing it a little bit faster. So I'm going to start here, and then I'm going to come down and stitch along here, around this leg, up, and then I need to redraw the leg on this one. Okay, so what I'm going to do is start about here. I'm going to sew down this line around both legs, around this foot, up, down this side, around and up to about here. Okay, so all of the doll has been stitched all around the edges, and I have left a hole here. So I started here and then I ended about an inch before I started, because I have to have an opening that will enable me to pull the doll right side out, okay, because obviously it's inside out right now. Before I actually do that though, I'm going to trim the seams so that they're not excessively bulky, which will also make it more difficult to turn it right side out. Be sure that you don't have your doll like folded over while you're trimming this, otherwise you could end up cutting something important. Okay, and always keep these scraps. You can use them for stuffing different things. You could even use it to stuff some of the doll. Okay, now this opening might not be quite big enough. I'm going to try it, and if it isn't, I will just get my seam ripper and rip out just a little bit of the stitches on either side. Okay, so I've made it about twice as big as it was. And I'm going to actually work on the feet first, just because they're a little bit more complicated because they're so small. And you can use a any kind of a rod or dowel to help. Work with it gently. You don't want to rip things out while you're trying to turn them right side out. Okay, you want to kind of pull against all of the seams so that you get those worked out fully. Okay, well our little doll looks kind of wispy and deflated, kind of like a deflated balloon. So we need to stuff the body. And first we're going to start working on the legs. And this is just kind of a long, slow process. Okay, so then with the needle and thread, we're going to close this opening. And I'm actually going to do that by bringing the needle from the inside a little bit before the seam opens up. Okay, I have the thread doubled and I have a knot on the end. And I'm just going to make some very small whip stitches along the side here. Just taking a little bit of the fabric Okay, so then you have the seam sewn up. We're going to tie a square knot. Okay, so I came from this side out that way. I'm going to go down. Okay, then I'm going to take this thread and I'm going to down into the seam, then up. Well, actually I'm going to go down. Now I don't want to lose my needle inside the doll, but I'm going to pull this thread through and then clip it. So there we have our little the body and the head. And before I sew the arms on, I'm going to show you how to paint a little face for a different technique that you can choose to do, or you can do the embroidery, or you can do the safety eyes. You just have to remember to do the safety eyes before you stuff. Even if you choose to use the sewing machine for a lot of the stitching, there might be areas that are actually easier to sew by hand. Okay, such as the hands. And please keep in mind that you can sew the entire doll by hand, which is a lot easier if you don't have a sewing machine. Also, if you just like to kind of spend time with your family, watch TV, all kind of sit together, hand sewing is a little bit more conducive to just kind of hanging out with other people while you're working. So it's really up to you. But even some areas that you might sew on the sewing machine, you can always go back and fill in some of the more detailed areas with hand stitching. Okay, so once you have the arms and hands sewn, then you want to trim them. And notice that I am actually trimming them inside the area that I was that I estimated, and that's because when you're actually ready to turn this inside out, you don't want a whole bunch of extra bulk to try to turn inside out. Now I've left spaces on both of these, just like I did on the body. Okay, so for the sewn doll, using fabric, I'm going to add an additional piece, and it is an upper arm, and I'm just going to sew it onto kind of a complementary fabric, one that matches the socks, and this will be added to the little